Okay, in this video I'm going to be comparing the differences between Fineliners and technical pens, like the Rotring Isograph. I'm going to be comparing the construction, usage, durability, maintenance, ink and grip, and also the price between them. I am also going to be doodling with them. The left-hand side of the video will be dedicated to technical pens and the right-hand side Fineliners. So let's begin. Let's talk about the construction of the Fineliner. It's quite simple. It has no moving parts. In the main body of the pen you have a sponge that holds the ink, and down from that sponge runs a strand of hard, porous material which protrudes out the end of the pen and becomes the nib. And that's it. The technical pen is very different and contains no porous materials or sponges. In the body of the pen there is a often refillable ink cartridge. The ink flows from that cartridge into a second chamber, which has a weight connected to a piece of wire. That piece of wire runs down inside the tubular pen nib until it protrudes out just a tiny little bit out the end of the nib. So when you press down upon the paper, the wire pushes up the weight, letting the ink flow down into the pen nib. Well, that's how it usually works. The wire is also called the cleansing wire, because when you shake the pen, the wire will move up and down with the weight, dislodging any ink particles that might have coagulated in there, and that will happen. Now, both types of pens have a great amount of overlap in the way you use them, because they're pens. They make lines on paper, except Fineliners are a lot more versatile in the ways you can make those lines on the paper. One of those differences is the speed at which you can use a Fineliner versus a technical pen. So with a Fineliner you can sketch like really fast, almost as fast as you like a seismograph during a meteor impact, just, and it will still make a solid line, just with a bit of thinning. But technical pens are a bit more picky. The ink flow seems to be designed to flow at a particular rate, and if you move at a really fast speed, you will find some line skipping and thinning. Not only that, but moving at a really fast speed can be a little dangerous for the thinner technical pen nibs, like under 0.5 millimeters, as the thin nibs can be delicate and needle-like, and only need a light pressure to activate the ink out of them. And it's difficult to keep the right amount of pressure at high speeds. So it becomes very easy to catch the nib on the paper. No, the technical pens really excel at slower and accurate line creation, due to the tiny amount of force that you will have to apply to the paper to get the ink flowing. Also, when using the finer nibs below 0.5 millimeters on paper that has some tooth to it, you might find it to be scratchy and horrible. Smooth paper is always best. Another thing technical pens don't like that you can do with Fineliners is using them on an extreme angle. The technical pens work best at a 90-degree angle, completely vertical from the paper. You could probably use them down to about 45 degrees. That's like the most extreme angle you could use them reliably, sometimes not so much. I mean, it's pretty easy to imagine why this is the case, because it's just a squared off piece of tube at the end of the nib, really. And also the cleansing wire isn't pressed into the nib as much on an angle, diminishing the ink flow. One massive advantage technical pens has over Fineliners is that the nibs don't wear down over time. Fineliner nibs slowly become wider as you use them, and the feel of the nibs also change a little bit over time. Also, if you damage a Fineliner nib, you will normally just end up with a thicker pen nib. And the things are disposable anyway, so whatever. If you damage a technical pen, you will need to buy a new nib, as the cleaning wire will be jammed in the tube and the ink will not flow, which is very expensive to replace. More about that later. The good news is that with a technical pen, if you never manage to damage it and you're not using it on some harsh tracing paper that can wear down steel, the thing might last for decades. The ones I'm using right now are like 30 years old and they seem fine. Although sometimes the body of the pen can crack if you constantly over-tighten it. So if you look after them, your grandkids might be using them, if there's any trees left to make paper with. So with a Fineliner, the only maintenance you need to do is throw them away and buy another one after they stop working. And Also, if you just put the cap on a fine liner, you can leave it in a cupboard or something for years and then just take the cap off and you'll find they probably haven't dried out. That's been my experience anyway. Now let me tell you my experiences with technical pens, like the Rotring Isograph, to give you an idea on what it's like to maintain them. So I have been using the Rotring Micronorms with the Rapido-Mat pen set. They're the ones I'm using in this video. They're just an older version of the Rotring Isograph. And I did have one that was leaking out through the plastic thread that was just above the metal pen nib. I unscrewed the tip and cleaned any sediment that was in the plastic threads and then screwed it back in place. Now it only leaks a little bit, not really enough to worry about. Then I had another pen that was leaking out through the nib itself. Turns out the cleansing wire and weight that's inside the pen nib was often stuck in the up position, letting the ink flow down through the nib even when it was making no contact with the paper. I had to remove the weight and the cleansing wire out from the nib to clean out any sediment that was in there. Then I somehow put it back without damaging that thin wire, and if you do that you need to buy a new pen nib. But anyway, it works really well now. And then also when I was drawing this, I had another problem, this time with a 0.25mm pen. The ink flow would always stop. When this happens, I normally expect the weight and the wire to be jammed. So I would shake the pen like mad to get the ink flowing again, only to have an ink drip all over my drawing. Eventually I realized that the weight and the wire were perfectly fine and the ink flow was stopping because there was no air getting into the pen to equalize the pressure as the ink came out. The air inlet was clogged. So shaking the pen upside down to get the ink out of the air supply worked. Also used my other hand as a hard stop while shaking it, like this. Now the pen is working as normal. So sometimes when my old technical pens aren't working, I wonder why I bother with them. But when they are working, I no longer wonder why, because they are fantastic. Let's talk about ink. Do you want your art to be made with good quality, waterproof and fade-proof ink? Is that important to you? Well, it's important to me, because I want to be prepared for the day when I draw something worth anything. Good to plan ahead. Because the design of all the disposable fineliners are basically identical, they're just a plastic barrel, I think the main deciding factor when choosing the brand of fineliner is the ink. So the ones I'm using right now on the right side are the Uni-pin fineliners made by Uni-ball. I like them because I think they're good value and they contain good ink. Other ones that contain ink that is water and fade proof are the Sukura pigma microns, I hope I pronounced that correctly. The Artline technical drawing pens, model numbers from 231 to 238. They are fineliners called technical drawing pens, just to be confusing I guess. But if you Google like Artline drawing system pen, they'll give you the right result. Artline also makes those cheaper black coloured fineliners, the 200 series. They contain non-fade proof ink. I'm not talking about those cheap things. And also the Staedtler pigment liners, also a good option. Now with technical pens, you can basically put any kind of ink you like in it. Who's going to stop you? I've put fountain ink in a Rotring before, and it worked fine. But I found the lower ink viscosity of the fountain pen ink made the ink flow a little too fast. Maybe that was just me, but I have found the best kind of ink to put in it is the ink they were designed for. So I've been using the Rotring drawing ink, which is waterproof and also fade proof, I'm quite certain. Anyway, you can get good ink in both types of pens. That's all. Let's talk about the grip. Plastic all round on both sides. So much the same, except maybe the Rotring Isographs are easier to hold because they sometimes are vaguely thicker, and quite often they also require less pressure on the paper, so you don't have to hold them as tight. So let's talk about the price and my conclusion about these pens. Now in getting the prices that I'm going to talk about here, I do look around and find some of the cheaper sellers of genuine products, whether that be Amazon, eBay or a local store. These options are basically available to anyone or most people. And when it comes to the cost of disposable fineliners, I only get the prices of them being purchased individually. If you buy them in a set, they're tons cheaper, but they will need to be replaced and probably not all at once. So the Uni-pin fineliners that I'm using right now cost me $4 each in Australian dollars. So let's create a unit of currency called the Uni, which is the cost of one Uni-pin fineliner. Another fineliner that you can buy, which is very popular, are the Sukura pigma microns, which I'm probably not pronouncing right. That one of these will cost you 1.3 unis. Now a single Rotring Isograph will cost you about 11 unis. Now you may be thinking, well, it's refillable, so a lot more than 11 times, so that's probably a good value. And that's a good point, because we haven't bought any ink for it yet. The bottle of ink I bought for my technical pen cost 5.25 unis, and it was a 21 milliliter bottle. So now we're up to the cost of 16 fineliners for one technical pen and a bottle of ink. But if you're going to buy some Rotring Isographs, you might as well buy more than one. So I have seen a pretty cheap set on Amazon. It came with 3 isographs, a mechanical pencil, and a bottle of ink for only 22 unis, and that's a really good price. I've seen them around here in Australia for twice that much. So buying a Rotring Isograph, or even a set of them, may not be good value for some people. I mean, can you see yourself using 22 fineliners in the foreseeable future? Or are you still using that set of fineliners that you bought more than a year ago? And are you prepared to put in the time and effort to clean and maintain your technical pens, so they don't get so clogged they become a waste of money? And if you do damage the nib of your technical pen, that will cost you another 10 unis. Have your fineliners ever leaked on you? Because technical pens do sometimes do that. It even happened to me in this drawing. All that I'm saying is that the Rotring Isograph is no longer as popular as it used to be, probably for a good reason. And I think that reason goes deeper than computers taking over traditional drafting tools. Because after using both types of pen, it feels like, and I don't really know if this happened in this order, when people were designing the fineliners, they were aiming for an experience to be as close as a technical pen as possible, but without the initial cost and the inconvenience of maintenance. And I think they got close enough so that buying an expensive technical pen may not even be worth it. But now I have to admit that after getting many Rotring Isographs and other technical pens, whenever I now pick up a fineliner, I just wish I was drawing with a technical pen. So if you decide to yourself that you don't want to spend all that money on a set of technical pens, but then someone offers you just to try out a technical pen, I would turn it away. Don't touch it unless you're prepared to buy it, because you may not be going back. And then you'll be going down some kind of rabbit hole money pit where you're just throwing money and then one pen comes, oh, this sentence has fallen apart. Much like how you'll need to take your new Rotring Isographs apart every once in a while, cleaning them, maintaining them, and then one day you accidentally leave ink in them and you take them out of the box set after a couple of months and they're all clogged up. You're like, oh, what have I done? It was so expensive. How do I get the ink out? And you spend the next 24 or probably even a couple of days just soaking them and scrubbing them, shaking them to get them working again. You know what would make the Rotring Isographs completely unbeatable? If Rotring included a pen mechanic with their pens when you buy a set, that would be excellent. Some little man with a scrubbing brush. Oh, okay, I think I'm done. I have nothing more to say, except that there are other brands of technical pens except the Rotring Isograph. Staedtler makes one. Staedtler. I always have trouble pronouncing that. Okay, right. Going now. Bye.